All righty. Today on the T Podcast, we have Cheryl Devail, who is the General Manager at KRVS Public Radio Station here in Lafayette. We're going to be talking with her about her position there, how she got to Lafayette, and why public radio is important for the Acadiana area. So sit back and relax. So, Cheryl, I'm glad to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Ben. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So you and I, we met at Leadership Lafayette this past year. And coincidentally, I think Monday, the class 37 is going to be released to the public.
Okay, so we'll know who's next in line, next in the hot seat.
So we are class Lit 36.
Yep,
and,
best class ever?
Yeah, best class ever. It will be the best class ever for years and years into the future. And if you have never been a part of Leadership Lafayette, trust me, you will. If you ever do become a part of it, you'll hear that phrase a lot.
Yes.
Every single class is the best class ever. I'm curious to see, though, what Lit 37, what the new class will call themselves. We were Lit 36 and 37. What rhymes with 37? I don't know how that's going to work out.
Yeah, there aren't any 7-Elevens around here, so that's not
That is true. That is true.
There are probably some religious people, so they might want to rhyme it with heaven.
Yeah, maybe.
Aside from that, it's a little hard to know. But that's their issue, not ours.
Yeah, definitely. Well, before we get started, our presenting sponsor is Chase Group Construction. You can check them out at chasegroupconstruction.com. They take the lead and become your one point of contact for the entire design build process. So if you're looking to build a new business or renovate a business, they can help you with that. They have a full portfolio of different projects that range from medical centers to popular restaurants and to multi-unit shopping centers. So check them out, like I said, chasegroupconstruction.com. They are a great local sponsor of ours and great guys. So, yeah, if you're looking to build something, they're the guys to call. All right, so let's go ahead and kind of get an introduction squared away. So tell us a little bit about you and where you're from, and we'll kind of talk about that for a minute.
Okay. I'm not from here. Here being Lafayette. I don't know how widely people are listening. I sometimes think of myself as once removed. My parents eloped from Baton Rouge in 1957, and I appreciate that they did. You know, they knew they wanted to have a family, and a lot of the social and political reforms that were ahead in the 60s, well, people didn't know when that would happen. So my father was career Navy, and my parents landed first in Oakland, California. I came along a couple of years after they did. I have an older sister also. And when I was 3, Daddy was stationed in San Diego. And through high school, that's where I stayed. He is still there in the house we grew up in. My older sister lives with him. And I took off. Yeah. I just ricocheted around the country for school and then for work. My entire background is in journalism. I was a high school newspaper nerd. And it's taken me to a lot of larger cities. Before Lafayette, Louisville, Kentucky was maybe the smallest place I'd lived.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then was in Chicago for 11 years, was in Miami for only 3, but it felt like longer. It's a fascinating place. And my Spanish was never better because I really, really had to live in Spanish much of the time.
Yeah, Miami, that's a whole different world than North Florida.
Oh yeah, the farther north you drive, the further south you are.
Yeah, it's so
in
weird.
Florida, yeah.
It's definitely redneck country around that area.
But and I was covering Florida and surrounding areas for National Public Radio for 11 years in the 80s and through the end of the 90s. I was a correspondent for National Public Radio, based first in Chicago, and spent several months in Los Angeles in 1992 after my initial coverage of the riots that began in April of that year, and said, there's a lot more to this that I still want to figure out. And it was a presidential election year.
Oh, so, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so naively I thought, well, this is going to be a big issue. It was George H.W. Bush versus Clinton. And as an issue, it faded from the national scene, but there were a lot of questions to continue asking. So that was really an immersion into Los Angeles. And after I moved back to Chicago and then from there to Miami at the last 3 years of the 90s, I said, okay, well, my siblings are all having kids. I'm the one who completely opted out. And I'd kind of like the nieces and nephews to know me as more than a voice on the radio. So I went back to California and lived in Los Angeles for close to 10 years. Took a job in Northern California, San Francisco Bay Area, and lived there for 6 years, 4 of those years as an entrepreneur.
What did you do?
You
made jewelry?
My business plan that I had to come up with very quickly was, I'm old, I know stuff, I deserve to get paid for it. And so I became a story editor for long-form audio projects, podcasts, produced podcasts and radio documentaries. And that 4 years also overlapped with the lockdown. And I was already working on Zoom
a couple
of years, before COVID. So I was able to work with people all over the world and also all over the country, because during that time, many public radio newsrooms they had to rise to the occasion, and produce more newscasts than before, and special coverage, and series, etc. And also, a lot of people in those newsrooms were not able to go to work.
Yeah.
And so, an organization that I have been affiliated with, Public Media Journalists Association, formed what they called the Editor Corps. And there were quite a few of us from around the country with some, I guess, mileage on our odometers, who on short notice could work with a newsroom either on a week of newscasts or training or mentoring or projects that the station wanted to, put together, but didn't have the staff to, monitor from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And that was pretty terrific. Not only was it a way to generate some income when between other projects, but it helped remind me why public radio journalism matters in a whole lot of places, especially when the local newspapers are either gone or a shadow of what they had been. Which
is a good example of what happened here in Lafayette.
Oh, no kidding. the local NPR station that does have a newsroom is trying to fill in that vacuum that having a quality local paper could, the vacuum left by the disappearance of a quality local paper. In the media ecosystem, at least the one I came up in, local television would take a lot of its tips from the local newspapers. Mm-hmm. And when the papers are, when I say paper, I'm speaking very broadly. It can be a site. It can be, whatever.
Something other than TV.
Right, yeah, or something even other than paper, Yeah,
right.
But when there is no local coverage, then a lot gets lost, a lot gets missed.
Do you think TV news stations do a decent job of doing that, or do you think it's more? Do you think more of the news comes from not just like newspapers, but obviously newspapers is like the legacy media, right, one of the oldest forms of news, but like especially in Lafayette, do you feel like the TV stations do good news, or do you think that they get their news from other news sources?
Wow. I'd say it weighs toward the latter.
Okay.
And Lafayette and Acadiana are an interesting situation, in part because when a young person wants to go into journalism as a living, the number of outlets here has gotten smaller. The imperative to keep television staffs lean and mean, local TV staffs lean and mean, is very present. We've seen, we've seen reporters replaced with what they call MMJs, multimedia journalists who operate the camera, take care of the sound.
Yeah, it's like a one-person
do the interview,
newsroom,
right?
Yeah. And studio all in one. They bring the camera, they set it up, they film themselves.
They might go live.
They edit their own video. Yeah,
absolutely. And while that's a really good skill set to have, it lacks a couple of elements that I think really helped me. One was coming up in newsrooms, because I also have worked in newspapers, and with all the quirky personalities and the not safe for work humor, and just. And the lessons one learns from veterans doing the same kind of work. Well, newsrooms of all sorts have thinned out a lot.
Yeah.
And so in a region like Acadiana, it's not as if the local media are hiring lots of new people or even maintaining people, veterans, who know the territory. So there's a lot of turnover,
Mm-hmm.
I from what I have seen, the Lafayette television market, the local television news, except for some anchors, people who have long histories here, is a stepping stone. It's a way that younger people will do a year or two here.
And then go on to something bigger.
And then go on to something else.
Yeah, because we're in regards to any industry that's media-based, whether it be newspaper or TV or radio, we're a small market.
Yeah.
Like the earning potential for advertising dollars and sponsorships is pretty limited here.
Indeed.
And I experienced it myself because, developing Lafayette, and the T podcast is solely funded with advertising and sponsors, and it gets pretty hairy. Yes. Whenever, if you lose a sponsor, you got to try to figure out who's going to replace that sponsor and if they're going to be able to pay the same amount, and then you're like, well, does it even make sense to contact this one business because it doesn't even relate to the type of content that we're trying to align it with. So, but yeah, going back to your thing, we are a small market, and it's interesting to see over the past 3 months the shift that happened with a couple of TV stations.
Indeed.
With some anchors, and it's so wild. And maybe you can kind of elaborate on how this works and maybe explain it, because you've been in the news a lot more in that kind of sphere of work. I've seen in my 13 years of living here, different TV stations rise up and then fall. And then another one would rise up and then ultimately be shadowed. So KLFY used to be the top channel to watch. Whenever I was younger, it was KLFY. I remember Blue Rothfuss, all those people. And then shortly after I moved here, KTC was like the number one station you wanted to watch. And it had Marcel Fontenot on it, Jim Hummel at one point, some other well-known names. And even in the meteorology space, Rob Perillo, he's been here for years, from the Bronx, that's where he's from. Yep. And he moved, I think he was at KLFY, then went to KTC. And it's interesting to see what's happening now as of late last year, with KTC doing some changes, letting go, or I don't know if the term letting go is appropriate. I don't know the exact details, but
I don't know all the details either.
Two of their big anchors, Marcel Fontenot and Jim Hummel,
went somewhere else.
Left.
Yep.
Essentially left, whether it be on their own means or agreement. It seems like it was an agreement or mutual thing, but went to another station. And now that station, which is KADN, News 15, KLAF, I believe, NBC, they're like a joint network. That one's becoming the number one now, because now you have the two big anchors on there, and there's already some solid anchors on there. Can you help me understand the dynamic and why these types of things happen?
Well,
if you can help,
I'll try. Yeah. And there is a tie to what we do at KRVS. The profit motive. They're in commercial broadcasting. There are trends in what kind of coverage to emphasize, what kind of anchor team, is most effective, attracts the most viewers. And frankly, how lean can your operation be and still present a credible newscast or, set of newscasts? And as you've seen, the cost cutting is the case everywhere.
Yeah.
And if if the corporate owners can get as much with less, they'll do it. It's, local sportscasters are not prominent the way they used to be, because there's lots of ways to get scores.
Yeah.
And, other people are shooting footage of that great play on their phones and sharing it that way, And so the profit motive has a lot to do with it. And there are consultants to the television industry, to the local TV news, and you will see trends in how they staff, where they place people. There are lots of stations now in markets the size of or smaller than Lafayette, where the local news isn't local at all. It's somebody in front of a green screen and, you could say pretending to be there, but there's not the same level of journalism in the public interest that can, for a long time, it could be a lost leader. Certainly CBS, for many, many years, was producing great documentaries. And that would, sort of catch your attention, and then you'd watch Ed Sullivan, and then you'd watch, the Beverly Hillbillies or whatever. Well, and by the names of those programs, you can tell, not only am I dating myself, but I'm talking about a bygone era. News is expensive to produce. It counts against the bottom line if you're maintaining a full-time correspondent in another place. And I'm talking about the network level now, but also anybody you see creating news reports, well, they don't do it for free.
Yeah.
And so the consultants and the executives at commercial broadcasting, radio or television, they want to do as much as they can with as little expenditure as they can. And we've seen the shift in quality. Same with newspapers as we knew them.
Because the Daily Advertiser used to be the biggest paper here. Like it was like the staple newspaper in Lafayette.
Yeah.
And now it's been reduced to, I think, maybe like one room in downtown, like a little office, where they used to have a building where they had their own printers.
Building. Yes.
And they printed all their own papers.
Yes. And, at that time, or, 10 years back, I happened into a job editing the Daily World in Opelousas.
Oh, nice.
And people remembered when the Daily World had 90 people working for it, and including its own presses, its own sales staff, its own layout people. And the present owner, Gannett, which owns USA Today and The Advertiser and papers all over the country, basically did what I've been describing, so that when I got the job after a visit to Acadiana, the paper I worked with had 2 full-time reporters, a photographer, and a circulation director, and I wasn't a behind-the-desk editor. I was out writing as much as anybody, and I loved it. It was a great way to immerse myself in this place that I had only visited mostly for festivals, because I do love to dance.
Yeah.
Zydeco changed my life. But it also gave me a really good view of Louisiana beyond cities,
Yeah.
People like to conflate all of Louisiana with New Orleans.
That's all New Orleans, Louisiana is New Orleans to people that are not from Louisiana. Yeah.
And, and St. Landry Parish and St. Martin Parish and Acadia Parish, they're very different. Iberia Parish, they're very different from Lafayette Parish.
Yeah.
And so, focusing on... I think a part of my heart will always be in St. Landry Parish. What I didn't know was that when circumstances in my, life compelled me to go back to California, Gannett never hired another editor.
Wow.
And now nobody works full time for the Daily World. That paper, the Alexandria Town Talk, and others are basically their ghost papers, and which is really too bad.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Where KRVS fits into all of this is that we are non-commercial.
Okay.
We, as you do, yes, we rely largely on supporters. They can be businesses, and we call it underwriting. You know, the Federal Communications Commission established back when it was Federal Radio Commission. You know, a lot of the channels, a lot of the signals under 92 on the radio dial, on the FM dial, as educational nonprofit stations.
Wow.
It's one reason that a lot of public radio stations in the country are licensed to public and private universities. In Louisville, the call letters were WFPL for the Louisville Free Public Library. That was its license holder for many years. In Miami, WLRN, the school board was the licensee, and it's Learn, you know. And there are guidelines that the FCC establishes so that we're not going to sell you a car. And when we solicit underwriting, we also, it's more of a statement of support for this station comes from.
Yeah.
If any of you all watch LPB, it's a very similar kind of message that isn't necessarily a call to action. You know, go buy your next, car here. But, it's partly to maintain the integrity of the non-commercial realm.
Yeah.
But believe me, even a station like KRVS, where we don't have a local newsroom, by the way, delivers a lot that commercial radio does not and cannot, and particularly in this region. We rep the culture hard. We play more Cajun, Zydeco, Creole music than any other.
Even K-Ball?
Even K-Ball. I mean, I love y'all K-Ball. I love KVPI. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
KVPI does a lot in French. Well, so do we.
Awesome.
And the point being, we also carry an evening of classical every week. We carry an evening of jazz every week, locally hosted. We have live hosts pretty much 7 days a week. Not every program, but on Saturdays, 8 hours of Zydeco and old school R&B, and the hosts are in the studio live. That's a rarity now. It costs a lot for commercial radio to have an entire bunch of live hosts. And by the way, our hosts are contractors. We do not have a lot of full-time staff. But we do offer a mix of music and cultural programming that is distinct from what you will hear on a lot of commercial radio. A lot of commercial radio is going to stick to one format or one genre of music.
Yeah.
And we mix it up. We like to say, we add the context. When you listen to us, you find out about who made that music, where they're from, what their context is, what their history is in, this was the first couple to put a Cajun song on wax, basically. And so, we try not to be strictly educational radio,
right?
Wagging our finger. We are located on the campus of UL Lafayette. That is our license holder. We are not the official mouthpiece of the university.
Okay.
And there are a couple of other points that I'll make, and then I've realized that you have a podcast to run. One is that we. I think of it as the place where the interesting stuff, the music that you might not hear anywhere else, thrives there. You can hear, if you really, really, really like Cajun music, and I like it, you can listen on Spotify, but you won't hear much in the way of context. And you won't discover a lot of new music. And radio is still a great way to do that.
Yeah, it is.
The other piece of it is that even as we don't have a local news department, we do carry National Public Radio news. I recognize that that's a red flag for some people. I can assert, as someone who worked there, that it operates without a preordained political agenda.
Okay.
That people strive to get
so there's no certain biases.
Sides. Well, some people will read bias in.
Yeah.
The news might not reflect their view of the world, but fairness is a key element to what every journalist there strives to do. It's also one of the few organizations now, news organizations, that does have quite a few international correspondents and correspondence bureaus around the country. And now the local stations with news departments are increasingly contributing to it. And the reason that matters is that there just are not a lot of what I'll call straight-up news options available, certainly not on terrestrial radio, in Acadiana. Our primary broadcast area stretches from just about the Basin Bridge to Lake Charles.
Okay.
And a lot of the parishes in between, there's no local radio at all. There's no place with people. It's not
they're so small markets that you need at least a somewhat of a city to have some sort of foundation.
Right. And it used to be there was radio in smaller places, but the industry has consolidated so much, and the business model has changed again, trying to reach far but with a lot less. Fewer people. Yeah.
Well, before we get too far, I want to go ahead and get my middle spaced advertisers, my sponsors here mentioned real quick. So go ahead and do that. So real quick, the Music Academy of Acadiana, they are Acadiana's top choice for music lessons. So if you are finding this podcast episode interesting, and we're talking a lot about music and news, you can definitely check out Music Academy of Acadiana. They teach music of all styles, different ages. It doesn't matter if you're young or old, you can learn music. They teach in piano, guitar, drums, violin, saxophone, flute, even audio production. And if you think you have a voice or if you want to improve a voice, they can help you do that. It's founded by UL Lafayette Music School graduate Tim Benson, who is also in a emo cover band called The Criers. So you want to check him out. They are nationally recognized as a top music school since 2016. And they are also producing really cool talent that have been on American Idol and The Voice. So again, check them out. Their goal is to make music lessons fun, educational, and to help foster the next generation of musicians and creative thinkers. And their website is musicacademyacadiana.com. And then I believe this sponsor, EPS or Electronic Protection Systems, I believe this might be potentially the last time we'll see them on the podcast. We'll see if they renew. If y'all are listening, we hope you do. But they are Electronic Protection Systems. They have been in Acadiana for over 20 years, serving different parts of the industries of smart home security systems, and they just started offering whole home water systems. So if you have water going into your house that could be smelling better, could taste better, you might have hard water or there might be sediment, they have a system where you can put it on the outside of your house and it filters everything going into your house, so it makes all your water better. And also your appliances, like your dishwasher, your washing machine, or even your dryer now has steam going into it. If you have one of those, this system can help protect those appliances by filtering out all the hard water and sediment, so help your appliances last longer. But you can check them out at eps-online.com, or we have a referral link. I'll go ahead and show you that and tell you about it. It's link.developinglafayette.com/EPS. Use that, get in touch with them, and if you want to have any of their products, I use them, not because they're sponsors, because I was using them before they became a sponsor, and I like their product well enough to where I was like, hey, we should do a thing. And so I'm telling you that I have the home security system and the water system, and it's been great, and we love it. Yeah, I could talk about them more, but there's a lot of talking points. But anyway, check them out, and we appreciate them as sponsors. All righty. So I want to get back into the conversation of KRVS, your involvement there. But last night I was looking over the website, which, by the way, if you want to go check out the KRVS website, it's just krvs.org. So check that out. It's also in the caption of this video. So it's listener supported. We've pretty much established that, and you talked a lot about the music and the different news components of it. But one of the things that I thought was really cool was that you guys started broadcasting back in 1963.
Yep.
Yeah. And the cool part for me, being kind of an electronic guy and kind of techie, is that in 1963, you guys were broadcasting just with 10 watts of power.
Yes.
Which I didn't realize, there was wattage needed. I associate with wattage with speakers and like how loud the speakers can be. But I never associated wattage with signal strength, I guess.
Yeah.
And so apparently with 10 watts of power, you guys were only able to reach like a half a dozen blocks.
It was low power FM before there was a name for it, to be sure.
Okay.
And, when KRVS got started, and the call letters, by the way, stand for Campus with a K.
Okay.
Radio Voice of Southwestern.
Wow.
Which UL was called back then.
That's right. USL.
Right, USL. And it was a student station. There were definitely faculty and staff who saw the need for a station, and it was primarily student staffed. And I will get back to that in a moment. About 40 years ago, when some of the programs from National Public Radio were gaining listeners, they have a flagship morning and afternoon news program, Morning Edition, All Things Considered. And a lot of public stations became members. NPR is a membership organization. We pay for programming from that organization and all the news and information it makes possible. But NPR does not include college radio as we know it. So over time, the student presence diminished quite a bit.
Why?
Well, when I say college radio, sort of the free form, hey, we're going to play some rock, I would say that, and I wasn't there, but the the format, who was producing the programs, et cetera, became a bit more stable, a bit more streamlined. Students come and go, and while there have been student program producers, we have a K-pop program, for example, that is really fun. And
K-pop, that's Korean, right?
Yes, it is. And
Korean pop.
And globally popular. And I love that there is one. And the producer of that program was a student until just this last semester. Now she's moved home to Singapore, and she's still producing the show for us, which is very
that's good. That's
She's
awesome.
excellent. And but a gap set in between the student body and the station that was becoming a bit more professionalized. We are in a different age now that we can run multiple streams of audio. And I'm really excited that in addition to the main channel, the main broadcast channel, we have 2 HD streams that you don't need a high-end vehicle to access. If you download the app, the free app at KRVS, on KRVS, Google Play, or the or the App Store, you can access all 3 streams. And the second stream, HD2, brings it back to campus radio. We've got students coming in, learning to program, learning to host, learning to write for broadcast, learning to promote. They're writing public service announcements. Now, this is still a work in progress. We had a soft launch on Halloween. And this next semester that's just getting started, we're really bulking it up. It's largely music that students would want to hear.
Okay. And that's changed over the past few decades?
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. But it is, because it isn't broadcast per se, there's a wider
there's a flexibility.
There's a flexibility, and we've had lots of students coming in a way that they haven't in 40 years, and I'm very excited about that, because not only are they learning what they might not learn in the regular curriculum,
right? And
this is we're not tied in to the course, the course offerings, but they're learning skills that will translate to whatever they do. And many of them are from the business school, from the music school, computer science students. There are some from communications department, but mostly they're curious, they love music, and they want to try this out.
Yeah.
And
I would have loved to have had an opportunity. I didn't go to college, so I probably would have missed out on that either way. But as a kid coming up in high school and not knowing what I wanted to do right out of high school, I knew that I was interested in radio, and just like I think whenever I first got our first computer back in 1999, I was 13 years old. Probably between 1999 and like 2003, those 3 or 4 years, I created a fake radio station.
Yeah.
I created a logo in Microsoft Word.
Wow.
Which that's not a program you want to design in, but I did because I didn't have any other means.
That's what it was right then. Yeah.
So I created a radio station called PACE, P-A-C-E. Why that name? I don't know. But I created a cool logo. It looked very comical and like whimsical, and I was like, man, that's a cool logo. And so I actually was trying to discover ways of building a radio station online back in the early days of the internet. I still consider the early 2000s early days of internet because we have evolved a lot since then. And there were some programs that were available where you can stream online, but they were very, very hard to understand. You had to have a lot of different technical pieces to go with.
Right,
yeah, and me being just coming into computers at 13 and still trying to figure things out. I literally at 13 years old, I had first hit the start button on a computer, like the Windows start menu. That was the first time I ever touched one, and so I had to do a lot of learning. But I wanted to start a radio station, and I never did. But
although you're doing something that also didn't exist when you were 13, and podcasting is a really terrific way to reach many more people in with a topic area that they have in common. I think that's really cool, and a lot of the skills that one might learn in broadcasting apply here too. In some ways, you're living your dream, Ben.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because as I was saying that, I'm like, I kind of feel like I'm doing the radio station thing. Now, obviously, radio stations I've seen have a lot more equipment.
Yes,
there's a lot more stuff involved. I have a very basic system, even though it seems complicated. It's pretty basic, but I guess throughout my life, and once I learned that the potential of creating some sort of radio broadcasting brand or thing was possible, I've always had that in the back of my mind. So I guess maybe doing this is kind of my subconscious saying, hey, you're going to do this no matter what.
Yeah.
And it just kind of happened. And I tell people the reason why I started the podcast is because once I started developing Lafayette full time, is I ran out of people to talk to. Okay. I didn't have any coworkers. I was a sole entrepreneur. And so I needed somebody to talk to, and I wanted to do it in a productive way and not feel lonely, not talk to myself. My business partner, him and a couple other guys that I have, they are busy doing other things, and I don't want to go burn their time up by talking about, are we getting a pair of chains, or
Sure.
What do you do for work? So I was like, maybe doing a podcast is something. I've heard of other podcasts that were popular back in 2018 whenever I started this. And there was one in Lafayette that I remember, Jan Swift's podcast.
Yes.
She does one. She's been doing it since 2017. And so I just kind of looked up some easy software to kind of stream live and make it easy on me and have a camera, because I knew I wanted to do video. And over time just added mics and lights and all this other stuff.
Yeah, and in some ways also it's narrow casting.
Yeah.
You're not subject to
right.
What broadcasters over the air waves have to do, but it allows you to speak to people with an interest in Lafayette, and there can't be enough media focusing on this region. We talked earlier about what's gone away, and even though KRVS is primarily cultural, we do offer programs that, as far as I can tell, very few other media entities do. We routinely interview representatives from nonprofits, cultural and social service nonprofits. This weekend, Habitat for Humanity and Parish Proud and Lafayette Consolidated Government are partnering to do cleanups in the 5 coteries that on Northside Lafayette.
Yeah, we learned about those in Leadership Lafayette too. At least I did. You already knew them, I'm sure.
Well, Leadership Lafayette was a very good way to get to know the place fast.
Yeah.
We've neglected to mention, I've been here a year and a half.
Only a year and a half?
Yes.
So you've been in Leadership Lafayette almost as long as you've been living here.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Because I knew I had to learn a lot fast about where I am.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah. And I've been living here since 2010, and I've seen Leadership Lafayette every single year. And I thought about joining, but I always looked at it as this, from for lack of better words, elitist kind of program where all the people that I've seen going into the program were like business people. They're all in nice suits and have great headshots and this and that. And I'm like, I'm not there. I don't feel like I'm there. Like I don't feel like I'm at that level. And that's just, me self kind of just bringing myself down, I guess. And maybe I am at a certain level and I just don't know.
Oh, Ben, you belonged there.
Well, I appreciate that. There are times where I didn't feel like it. And then there are times I'm like, oh, I definitely feel like it this class. Like the culture and there was the culture, at Vermilionville, what was it, culture and quality of life day.
Yes.
I really enjoyed that day because I was like, this is why I think I do a lot of what I do is to make quality of life in the area better, whether that means a very small part, having more that we would like to have in Lafayette as far as businesses go. But still, I enjoyed that day a lot and it felt good. But like the days of like the nonprofit days and the education day, way out of my element. I'm not an education guy at all. And, but yeah, it's, I appreciate you saying that. But yeah, I figured out being in the class that the type of people that go into Leadership Lafayette are very diverse, very wide, especially this for our year, very, very diverse. We had white, black, straight, gay, trans, the whole gamut.
Someone from Oman, someone from Thailand.
Yes, yeah. So really cool.
And also very different life experiences too.
Definitely.
And that was I know I would not have met a lot of the people I met. And as somebody who approached a lot of the places that I have lived as a journalist, which is a great way to learn your way around town.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing it in quite the same manner, and I thought, okay, let me apply for this and get a sense of where the, who's making things happen here and how it all fits together. And so that was a real advantage for me because, I think I was the oldest person in the group. I'm going to be 65 next birthday.
Yeah, I think you were. But you brought a lot of good wisdom. Let me just say that. When you spoke, I think a lot of people stopped talking because there are some people in the group that they would talk and they would have other conversations happen at the same time, just kind of the banter. But you didn't talk a whole lot. But when you spoke, everybody's like, hold up, Cheryl's talking.
Yeah, and and the opportunity to learn from each other was huge. And as it turns out, and I was, mentioning how there's a regular segment on KRVS called après-midi, afternoon, because we French.
Yeah.
Okay. And Monday through Thursdays, starting at 3 p.m. Not every day, but we're trying to be more intentional about it. Remember, there are only 4 of us on staff, including the 2 technical guys. We play interviews with representatives of nonprofits. Yes, the Hilliard Art Museum. Yes, Acadiana Center for the Arts and the Acadiana Symphony.
All the obvious.
But also court-appointed special advocates, people who volunteer to work with children in the family court system. Second Harvest, Habitat. And part of what Leadership Lafayette helped me do not only was find out what some of those groups were doing, but I've had representatives from our class on the air, Basin Arts. Now we have a monthly segment with Basin Arts, the dean of the School of the Arts at UL Lafayette, interviewing a visual and another format artist, and that runs the final Monday of every month in that time slot. They're 15 to 20 minute interviews, pre-recorded. And as somebody who is not from here, I didn't realize how fortunate it is that that program comes on at 3:00. That's the school pickup hour. And so if people are listening to KRVS, and, it might be the decision of the person behind the wheel.
Right.
And then, whoever else is in the vehicle, it's an opportunity to find out what your neighbors in other parts of the region are doing. And I really like mixing up the focus and the guests and the kinds of activities that we talk about. Yes, before the Christmas holidays, somebody from Ballet Theater was in to talk about the Nutcracker, and we also had Leah Porter in to talk about the Creole Nutcracker. And all that to say, I strongly believe in the public element of public media. It's for all kinds of people.
Yeah.
Close to a fifth of our programming is in French or Creole. Sometimes it's the song lyrics, but often it's also hosted in French. And yes, for the people who grew up hearing the language, Louisiana French, which varies from parish to parish.
It changes a lot.
Also, though, for the French immersion students, and they're now, I guess, about 2.5 generations of people who have come up through French immersion and who are doing really interesting creative work. And so we want to encourage that element too. And, this place, as somebody who's lived in a lot of them, this place is not like anywhere else. And we at KRVS really strive to present that in its, in as much fullness as we can.
So I want to kind of hover on that one for a little bit. You said this place is very different, very unique, and compared to the places you've lived. Obviously, you were not born here, but you have family roots here.
In Louisiana.
Yeah. So, can you explain or try to explain why this place is so different versus other places? And I think you and I have kind of talked about it a little bit here and there in Leadership Lafayette, kind of describing what this area has and the pull that it has. Because you hear a lot about this term called boomerangs, where people that were from here decided, I want to get away. There's nothing for me here. Right. They get away. They go to a city that's bigger, and ultimately, for whatever reason, whatever life paths that they end up on, end up back in Lafayette. Now, a lot of it, or the Acadiana area in general, because I say Lafayette, this is like the heart of Cajun country, but like Cajun country is like pretty big.
Broad, yes.
And it's very different, and like you said,
Creole
St. Landry,
country too,
So like this whole area is just very diverse, but those people end up back wherever they're from in South Louisiana, excluding the New Orleans area, kind of, because that's not technically Acadiana. It's like, I think we're 22 parishes officially is Acadiana, but like a lot of people look at like 9 parishes as like the heart of Acadiana, which Evangeline down to Iberia, Vermilion, and then St. Martin, kind of in that area, St. Landry, of course. What is your thoughts on why it's so different? Like what is that thing?
I carry a cutout of the state, kind of a profile on a key ring.
Okay.
I remember getting it at what used to be called the Red Arrow Workshop on an earlier visit here. And not only does it remind me every day of the former owner, the late owner of the Red Arrow Workshop, Julian Johnson, but it's a great visual aid to explain what I'm about to. I circled the southwestern corner of the state.
Yeah.
And try to explain that it developed in relative isolation from that big port city. Now you can drive, Baton Rouge traffic, depending, in a couple of hours between Lafayette and New Orleans.
Yep.
The stretch of Interstate 10 that connects those two was really only finished in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And so much of it is over open water.
Are you talking about the Chapelai Basin Bridge, or are you talking
I'm talking about I-10,
Yeah.
between the two. And yes, the Basin Bridge, but also, it's an engineering marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't exist in a way that was, useful to anybody until about 45, 50 years ago. The point being that what we call Acadiana remained rural. People kept speaking French, maintained a hands-on relationship with their food. That fascinates me, just how rooted, sometimes literally, the foodways here are. A boucherie is a social event. Now, no, we don't all go, we don't all get all our food home harvested.
Right.
But farm to table has always been a thing
here, yeah.
People kept making this place that is not particularly hospitable to human life, making it into a home. A lot of people did not come here by choice. I'm talking Cajuns and Africans, both in different ways.
Yeah.
Arrived here not having said, oh, yeah, this is where we want to go. And they somehow made it a home.
Yeah, the people were forced to live here. Right. Exiled from their countries in one way or another.
Right. And also, they were kind of spread out. They made their own fun. That certainly has implications for the music and for the big families, that were common in the grandparents' generation. Catholicism was another reason, A lot of people still, this place is
very Catholic.
Culturally Catholic the way Utah is culturally Mormon. If you are in Salt Lake City, you're not going to go shopping on a Sunday.
Because everything's closed.
A lot is closed, yes. And here, the fish on Fridays custom has hung on, even though we're now close to 60 years past Vatican II when they relaxed the rules around that in Catholicism. And so you kind of know it's not a surprise that Mardi Gras is a holiday here.
It's a week-long holiday.
Yeah.
Or longer, actually. But
and in the rest of the country, it's only a Tuesday,
I know, it's only a Tuesday everywhere else.
Right. And so all those factors, I think, contribute to the distinct culture here. People learned to harvest, hunt, fish, cook, trap out of survival, and those foodways got passed down in ways that might have been interrupted if they were in a larger population center. The customs around courtship got passed down.
I love that you know all this, and you've only lived here for a year and a half.
Well, the music helped a lot, Yeah. There are all these songs, and je ne parle français, but there are phrases that come up in a lot of the Cajun and Creole music, Un fil de 14, you know, a 14-year-old girl, which back in the day was considered marriageable age.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And they started early. They had a lot of kids. And, you know, and that, you know, 14-year-old was the object of desire, you know, in a love song. Okay. Moving right along.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But, you know, and the music got passed down within families. So some of the songs are centuries old. And, you know, only recently, you know, relatively recently, have people begun to study them, write them down, record them, however you want to call it, you know, in whatever form they might record it. And there was a point at which people began to feel kind of sheepish about these unusual ways. Thank goodness there were people who saw beyond right, you know, where they were, and realized that that the music of this region and the food of this region, thank you, Paul Prudhomme from Opelousas, taking real Cajun cooking to New Orleans and setting off a lot of ripples, you know, sort of helped restore the pride and heritage. A lot of the cultural factors that I just talked about, you know, also contribute to some of the politics.
Yeah.
And some of the ways that people interact with each other. Hospitality is real. If you're out in the middle of nowhere and you see a light in the window, people can find a degree of welcome that isn't quite the same in the rest of the country. I have friends who lived the van life for a long time.
Outside of this state, I'm sure.
Yeah. And they ended up moving here in large part because, you know, they were in the Walmart parking lot, and theirs is a very nice camper, by the way.
So glamping?
Yeah, and a lady knocked on the door and said, "You want to come have dinner at my house?" A Cajun lady. And they said, "What? Where are we?" You know, and I mean, and they learned to dance Zydeco. We met as dance pals, you know, and they ended up living here. And, you know, they both had lived in a lot of places, but there was something about here that somebody would want to introduce themselves to someone
and feed them.
Yeah. And that was more than a decade ago, and they are still friends. You don't get that everywhere. And there is a warmth and, yes, a joie de vivre that exists here. I know that during the most restricted days of COVID, I would stream KRVS from 2 time zones west of here and remember that somewhere there was joy and a degree of optimism, even though this part of the country went through some really difficult times as a result of COVID. But the culture reflected another reality, not escapism necessarily, but something that I realized I wanted a bit more of. You know, at the moment, it would get me dancing in my kitchen. Okay.
Yeah.
Over the long haul, I had a sense that, okay, this is, I'd been visiting here off and on for about 20 years, you know, with Zydeco as my gateway drug, and eventually was serious about relocating here. was interviewing for a couple of full-time remote jobs with the remote being Lafayette, for journalism nonprofits. And I had stayed in contact with various people around here, and a couple of them tipped me off when the general manager position came up at KRVS.
Oh, yeah.
And I said to myself, I'll apply,
But you didn't know if you'd get it.
Oh, heck no. It was more of a, do I want to face myself in the morning? Well, you don't want to say, I decided to just never give it a go.
Yeah.
It is my first general manager job. I came from what people in broadcasting call the content side.
Okay, yeah. Wouldn't that be considered the peons?
No, but it's a different vibe.
Yeah, definitely.
It just is.
I mean, I do content all the time, so I feel like I'm a content guy. I'd be that group.
Right. And so it's, but I do know a lot about public radio. I've been involved in it off and on since 1988. And it's been a real education to connect in a different way to that system of stations, but also to help deliver the best of what public radio can be to a region that I'd like to think benefits greatly, and I have had people sitting as close as you are to me say, love y'all's music, hate your news. I appreciate that you have a different outlook on the world. We can still dance to the music.
Yeah.
The music, the food, I joke, the saints and copious amounts of alcohol make it possible for us to all live together.
Right.
But I mean, the culture really, really does matter. There is not as robust local music scene in most parts of the country. And I'm not just talking about accordion-driven music. There's some really talented R&B and jazz and rock performers, not to mention all the classical folks. The social dance scene, which, is not primarily a pickup scene, but just, hey, there's a band playing at the Feed and Seed, let's just go get our dance on. That doesn't exist in so many parts of the country. It's one of the reasons that the musicians from here spend a lot of their summers going to festivals in other parts of the country where they're hungry for this stuff. And as I was learning how to Zydeco, I never knew that people would pay to go to a week-long heritage camp to be able to dance to their heart's content, learn more about the culture, all of that. Well, I did find that out, and I experienced it. And, the bands are in great demand in other parts of the country where there isn't much of a local scene.
Yeah.
People wish they had,
and we take it for granted.
Yeah. I mean, for better or worse, the heritage camps, the festivals, they also pay the musicians very well, whereas a $10 cover here can get you into a lot of great music. It isn't always great for the musicians.
Right. Isn't there like Blue Moon, is it Blue Moon Saloon? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that there's a lot of good there.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's a cluster of places in downtown Lafayette.
And there's another place in downtown that's not far from opening soon. It starts with an A. It's, Antique Alley.
Okay.
So it's off of, so if you take Congress and it turns into, goes towards the Thruway, it's right on that, it's the last road right before you get to the Thruway on your left, right by Salvation Army.
Yes.
There's a little building, and there's a little road called, I think, Antique Alley.
Yes.
And there's that building right there.
They're turning that into a club.
They're turning it into
or a
jazz blues restaurant bar.
That's great, because the talent is here.
Yeah.
The talent is here, and it deserves all of the attention. And when I realized that any Wednesday through Sunday, I can go hear great music performed well by people who are passionate about it. How lucky can you be? And when we think about what draws people to an area, what amenities, what, as you said, quality of life, that contributes greatly to it. Now, you can live in Lafayette, you can live in any of the surrounding parishes and not plug into it at all. That's fine. I am really glad I can. And when people think about where to locate, including the boomerangers, they look at certain indicators. Certainly the schools, certainly the parks. This is a medical hub, and that matters to a lot of people. And I was surprised pleasantly surprised to see that the presence of a public radio station is one of those indicators of quality of life too. And I take very seriously the role that a KRVS can play to enhance the quality of life. We routinely bring musicians into the studio, our performance studio, to play live. And
so they set up all their instruments and everything, right?
Yeah,
there.
well,
Okay.
we have the performance studio is top notch.
Yeah.
We have a pair of the best ears in town as our chief engineer. His name's Carl Fontenot, and he does the live mix. But the studio is very much designed for performance, so we keep a piano in tune. We keep a drum kit up. We make sure that it's acoustically good for performance. And anywhere from a soloist to, we've had 8-piece bands in there. And they sound terrific. And they enjoy playing there because the atmosphere is really warm. And, not every station has that.
Oh.
And so we had a visitor, Chris Rader from Rader Solutions, who is helping Basin Arts display some, basically a gallery at KRVS. We're one of the first nonprofits that is involved in the Bare Walls program. And we invited Chris Rader over. It was our first time meeting. And he was astonished at what he saw. Not just, the art on the walls, but the whole atmosphere of the station. We have a lot of folk art. We have a lot of reflections of what the culture is. There's a huge Philip Gould photo of the last night at Hamilton's Club. It's one of the first things you see when you come into the door. Somebody made it looks like a quilt, but it's just a big art piece of Evangeline bread labels, photographs of a lot of the culture bearers. And as somebody who began in radio during the analog era, and that meant that if I was away from my base and had to file on a clear line, I would have to go to the nearest public radio station to send the audio down a clear line to Washington. So I've been in a lot of stations. this one had me at hello. You know, I mean, I remember just out of curiosity on a visit for a festival, asking if I could take a look at the studio. And it's a very, again, the space, like the programs, invites you in, you know, tells you something about where we happen to be. There's a photograph of Dennis McGee. It's got to be from the 70s, based on the hairdos of the people around him. And he is playing his fiddle with this beatific smile on his face, surrounded by members of the Ragin' Cajun football team in uniform. That they ought to put on their college recruiting material, you know.
Yeah.
You know, because, and from what I understand, that can be that can also be a draw for a lot of people coming to the university, and it contributes to a quality of life that I know has led quite a few people to retire here. They might have been going to those festivals or hearing some of the bands when they tour. And the culture that thrived here, and that for a moment, you know, like late 60s, early 70s, you know, as modernity was creeping in, people were a little ashamed of, is now an economic engine that attracts people here. And, you know, I guess the lieutenant governor and others talk about the cultural economy.
Yeah.
Well, we are a part of that cultural economy. We are, you know, at KRVS, we are a connection to people who are just learning about the music or who know it well, who can sample some of the humor that doesn't make sense in any other context, you know, and people code switching between English and Creole and French. And we're a reminder of what they've left. Louisiana retains more of its natives than any other state by a large margin. And, you know, sizable numbers do, you know, they go to Houston.
Yeah.
They go to South Los Angeles County. They go to Dallas and the area near Oakland, California. And for quite a long while, up till COVID, certainly those California communities did have regular Zydeco dances, bands that would come from here and play out there.
Wow.
And that was great for a while, and then I realized, well, maybe I move to a place where I can get that
all the time. And
yeah.
You can pretty much rest assured you can find it somewhere any day of the week, especially near the weekend here.
Yeah, even the jam sessions, you know? I mean, it's a...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, go to Munkus Park on a Saturday and you'll see it. You'll see little groups of, you know, people playing accordion and they might have a horn or a violin or a fiddle, as some people say.
Yeah. And last weekend I saw a little girl. I was in Breaux Bridge, Buck and Johnny's.
Oh, yeah. Iconic.
Yep. And there's, you know, kind of an MC who reads off whose birthdays are coming up and all that. And a little girl who I realized was his granddaughter, you know, kind of tugged on his sleeve when the Preston Frank and his family band started playing a waltz. And she said, "Dance with me." And they did. And it was so sweet. And I've seen that replicated so many times, you know, the kids learning to dance standing on their parents' feet.
Yeah.
You know, or learning to cook, you know, watching at the stove or being made to stir the roux. You know, that doesn't come from just nowhere.
No, I mean, it doesn't. It's the family atmosphere that we have here in the culture. It just, and I'm thinking, like, while you were talking about all that, I was thinking through the points in my life where I stood at the stove watching my mom cook and my grandmother. And whenever my grandmother used to make these biscuits in a skillet.
Okay.
And these were biscuits where if you ate too big of a bite, you'd feel it, like you'd need a drink. But like they were the best biscuits I've ever had, and I really can't find that today. And it's one of those things where I wish I would have learned how to make it. Mm-hmm. And even though I kind of like, I would go visit my grandmother, we call her Momo, and I'd see her make them. I can't get that anymore, and I kind of wish that I would have picked it up. I'm sure my mom knows how to make it, but I've never asked her to make them for me. I don't know why.
Okay, if you are listening, Mrs. Powers, Ben wants to learn how, and and that's just it. A lot of what we think of as culture, you don't realize is culture until you get somewhere else.
I know, until you get where you don't have it.
Right. I mean, we were not directly from Louisiana, but we ate red beans and rice on Mondays, and we knew why. Monday used to be the traditional wash day pretty much all over the country, and the red beans and rice were a dish that you could pretty much put on the back of the stove and not have to tend to too much.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about it.
You wouldn't have to worry about it.
Back burner.
And it just stayed with the culture here. I mean, red beans and rice is a Louisiana thing.
Yeah.
Other people did other things on Monday, ate other stuff on Mondays. But, and only when I left home did I realize, oh, okay, they have no idea, up here, wherever I was, about red beans and rice.
Yeah.
So much of the regional cultures, or so many of the regional cultures in other parts of the country have kind of gotten homogenized, so there is a sameness. And for lots of reasons, the distinctions here have persisted, and yes, it takes a lot of effort. It takes institutions. It takes money, I mean,
everything.
Yeah, it takes everything. We at the public radio station, we have to earn our keep too. If you watch Louisiana Public Broadcasting and they do the on-air fundraisers, well, so do we. And we also do solicit support from businesses to help sponsor us. We have to keep the equipment up to date. We have to, do everything it requires to run a radio station without commercials. And so, when you go to a festival and you see the sponsors, or look in the program and you see, where the support is coming from, how is it that there are two major music festivals here that don't charge admission? Mm-hmm. I mean, and I've really come to appreciate how much work there is behind all the fun.
There's a lot.
There's a lot. And it also does contribute to the quality of life. And, I'm really thrilled to be able to play some small role in that. Whether you live in Acadiana or you're far away, we can, we can remind you of home.
Yeah, I love that. I saw you had your folder there. Is there any notes in there that we did not talk about, but that you want to mention before we head out? Because I know we definitely mentioned that it's listener supported.
Yes.
And businesses can also be a support system there.
Absolutely. KRVS.org, hit support, or you can contact. You can contact underwriting at krvs.org. You can contact me, CDEVALL at krvs.org. We have a lot of opportunities during and we're on 24/7. We have a lot of opportunities to get your message of support out there, and we're not chock full of commercials. So you might be the only such message in the course of an hour of programming, surrounded by some of the best music there is.
Yeah.
And that I think counts for something too. And yeah, I guess the other thing I would want to say is that we are able to pivot in ways that other stations maybe can't. 6 months out of the year, we're concerned about the prospect of hurricanes.
Right.
And we're a 100,000 watt station. Our chief engineer, our operations director, and I can transmit emergency information, bulletins from emergency ops organizations, in the parishes we serve, and evacuation routes, how to shelter in place, all of that. And really, even the university hadn't quite realized just how portable and how powerful that can be. And so, I now have a sleeping bag in my office. I've covered a lot of extreme weather events in the course of my life. And it isn't so much, we suddenly turn into a newsroom, but we suddenly can, on a dime, say, okay, this is what our public requires, and we're going to be more portable and more with a farther reach than pretty much any other medium, right there. That this is something I've been working on to make sure that we're ready. Maybe it's my, back of my mind still thinking about, still thinking in a news sense.
Yeah.
Because, yes, the TV stations can do that too. But you can't drive and watch your screen.
You shouldn't do that.
You really shouldn't do that.
Some people do.
I know. But anyway, there are ways in which we can, because we do not have a fixed format, even though we play a lot of different kinds of music. Sunday we carried live coverage of the
inauguration.
Yes, of Governor Landry's inauguration. First time Louisiana's had a new governor in 8 years. LPB was making an audio feed available. We thought it was going to be on Monday. They shifted it for because of the weather, and we said, okay, we're going to go with it. We really are very much about public service, and people define that in a lot of ways, but it's also part of why non-commercial media exist.
Yeah. So I think that now knowing all the stuff that you've mentioned about your role at KRVS, just all and your background and all that, I am going to personally tune in more.
Hey, thanks.
Because there are times where I don't want to hear the same song on repeat every hour. The hit radio stations, that's what they do. They play the hits.
That's what they do. Yeah.
And every once in a while, they'll throw in something older, like they'll have like a segment that's designed to be, flexible with music mainly. Still got commercials, but it's like all the major stations in town that are like hit stations. It's the same hour on repeat. So like if you drive a couple hours, you'll hear that same song maybe 2 or 3 times.
And there's commercial pressure to do that.
Yes.
We also, on the app and on the website, offer the on-demand option. So if a program you like is at 5:30 in the morning,
Right.
You don't have to be awake at 5:30 in the morning to hear it.
Yeah.
And so that applies to all the locally produced programs. You can call it up when you want.
Yeah, I like that.
Ain't technology grand?
It is. It's fantastic, and it's also scary, but it's good whenever it has a good application for it. And like I said, I'm a tune in and get a little bit more acquainted with it because I've been curious, but I wasn't sure. Whenever I hear public radio, and I think a lot of people probably associate public radio with like monotone talking.
Oh, Saturday Night Live nailed it. I was rolling over when they began to parody public radio. I have been in studios during, like if I'm traveling and having a membership drive, I'll go and help answer the phones or do something. And I saw two women, having a really great, lively conversation, laughing and all that. And as soon as the on-air light came on, they went into this mode. And you are listening to, the call letters, and we're so glad to be here. And I thought, oh my gosh.
I know.
Who can listen to that? I mean, I understand. Some people think that's what it is, but what's very cool about where we are now technologically is that with the proliferation, the advent of multiple streams of audio, there's some really great programming. I mean, the public station out of Jackson State in Mississippi, which is a very good jazz station, by the way, has a digital channel called The SIP that's much more contemporary R&B, and it's just it's really terrific. Radio Milwaukee has a 24/7 channel called Hyphen, HYFIN, and its slogan is connecting the culture, and it's all kinds of black music. And not only are these auxiliary channels, but they have their own underwriting. They are sponsoring their own events. They have a full range of on-air hosts. And that was not as possible anymore. Just as the setup you have here would have been much larger and much more bulky and much more expensive, even 10, 15 years ago. The ability to program multiple digital streams is going to make all of this more accessible for more people, and that's public too, and I'm down with that.
Dude, I love it. Like, I feel like there's a lot more that we could talk about regarding public radio. You've been doing this for a long time, so I would love to say that I have a long time, and we're actually an hour and 38 minutes. So
gracious. I
know we went to the hour and a half mark.
I appreciate that you that you wanted to continue the conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not going to cut the conversation off whenever there's good nuggets of information and things that I might be able to learn from it. And of course, I tried my best not to do too much talking because I feel like sometimes I can do a lot of talking. And
me too.
Yeah, I know, but I'm interviewing you, so I figure you know what? I've always heard that the best thing to do when interviewing people is to be a listener, not a talker. But it's a conversation, so I do have to talk every once in a while. But I do appreciate you taking the time out to talk and talk about KRVS, talk about your journey throughout your life of with family here and then living in being born in, you said Oakland?
Yeah,
and just that whole experience, and then how you ended up here. I love all that, and I knew that there was a lot more that we could talk about whenever we were in class together. I was like, but I think it'd be good to have you on the podcast. I was like, that's why I did that. And
thank you.
Well, yeah, I'm excited to see what other people think about KRVS now with the conversation, and hopefully there's people that watch this video that might find the station for the first time.
Right.
And even though it's been around since the 1960s.
I know, yeah. And we really celebrated that anniversary. We had a series that you can still access, on the app or the station website called 60 Years of Radio Acadie.
Nice.
One name we go by is Radio Acadie. And it was people who've been associated with the station over the years telling its story, basically. And a very powerful episode of it. They're 4-minute segments.
Okay.
So we could fit them into different parts of the day. But one of the segments was about fan mail. And it takes it takes a beat or two before you realize, oh, they're talking about letters from incarcerated people.
Oh, wow.
Exactly. And it takes on a whole different feel. I mean, this is one of the few stations in the region that plays reggae. And I found out from, editing this segment that at a particular federal detention facility that was holding quite a few people from the Caribbean, there was a run on batteries every Friday at the commissary. I guess the commissary was closed weekends at that time. This was some years back. And it was because they wanted to hear the reggae show on Sunday nights. And if that doesn't convey the power of the medium, I don't know what is. You never know who is listening and what they'll gain from it. And that's part of my belief in public media also. I think that there is something in it for the entire public, and that all that is, yes, we live in a capitalist society, it's like the water we swim in. And there's also room to value that which the market doesn't necessarily, put a price on. So
yeah, I love that. I'm gonna have to try to find that segment. I want to hear that. I don't know if that's something I can easily find.
Well, if you go to programs, you'll find a link to 60 Years of Radio Acadie.
Okay.
There are a couple dozen segments, but they're each marked, and they're 4 minutes each, and they tell the story of the station in a really sweet way.
Awesome. I'm going to check it
out. KRVS.org.
There you go. Well, also, if you're listening in your car, it's 88.7.
Yes.
FM, right?
FM.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Cheryl, I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope that people that are listening, if there is even just one person listening that gains anything out of it, I think they'll gain something, because you've offered a lot of information and a lot of good talking points and a good foundation of why KRVS is needed and what it does for the community. And I hope that with your leadership, of course, in it, that it stays around for years into the future.
That's my hope too. I definitely want to leave it in good shape and able to thrive, because it ain't about me. It's very much about what we can do for anyone who listens. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, you're welcome, and I'm glad to have you on. And I hope you have a great weekend.
And I wish you a peaceful and productive and purposeful Martin Luther King holiday.
Yeah. So you have a little button right there.
Yeah.
It's always a great day. I don't want to say a holiday.
I understand.
It's a great day, a good representation of still where things need to be, and we're not 100% there.
We know we don't give up either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Cheryl, again, thank you for taking the time out, and I enjoyed the conversation.
As did I. Thank you, Ben.
All right. Thank you. All right, guys, and that is it. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you don't want to take the whole hour and a half or hour and 45 minutes now to listen to it on Facebook or to watch it. We do have the the Apple Podcast version. There's on Spotify. There's the YouTube version. There's also YouTube Music's version, audio and video on YouTube. So if you want to listen to it or watch it elsewhere, there's a couple of different areas, but you can find all that information out in the caption of the video. So we appreciate you listening. For those that were watching, thank you. I saw Shira Morant on there.
Hi, Shira.
Yeah, she said, "Yay, my Lit 36 family." So she watches a lot of my stuff now, so I'm thankful for her. But yeah, anyway, that is it, and I appreciate you guys listening. And again, Cheryl, thank you again.
I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
All right, y'all have a good one.